in all 50 states. NMLS number.
Mics are live.
Oh, so okay, welcome everybody. No music. All right, we're just going to go.
Oh,
good
morning.
planets are
I
hard
can't
to
even hear myself.
find.
I can't hear myself. So hello.
Okay. Welcome to the show, folks. We're going to play the intro in the second part because we're going to track that down. And I'm forwarding it to you right now, Andrew. So you'll have it in a second. Hang on.
Just talk amongst yourselves. Well, it's a sunny morning this morning, which is bizarre. It's like, what is that bright light out there?
And I don't know. It's a big spotlight out there.
I don't know.
Welcome to the show. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, and it's brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts because
every tree needs a champion.
Go to bartlett.com. All right, and that's all we need to do because the guy standing right there,
Mr. Bartlett
himself, Scott Jamieson from Bartlett Tree Experts is in studio today because it's one of those shows where we talk about your tree care. You should get on the phone, 877-711-5611, and or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and we're talking to our interns today. Who knows? We might even do TikTok. Oh. Okay.
Tic Tac, aren't those little mint things? Those are those little mints, right?
It hurts me even to talk about TikTok. So we will, there's only one response you can have to that. Oh, I need the prod comp up there, Andrew. Let's try this again.
Shut up, Wesley.
Okay, there we go. As we said, Scott Jamieson is in studio. We're talking trees today, and I need to do a shout out to my kitty, Lagata, who is 10 years old today.
Aww.
And it's her birthday. Groundhog Day is her birthday. And how do I know this? Well, she appeared in our backyard in the middle of the year, and we took her to the vet, and we got her neutered and the ear clipped. We thought we were going to let her go back because we thought she was feral, and then that's no feral cat.
No.
And then the vet said, yeah, she's about 6 months old. So I did a little back time, and I went, oh, Groundhog Day. Okay, that's her birthday. So there you go. And that's how my kitty got her birthday. And I thought that's the perfect time. And the reason I bring that up is because Scott, and again, we talk tree care issues here, but we also talk about arborists,
yes.
and which is really weird in Microsoft. And on Facebook, you type in the word arborist to get the squiggly red line. Can we get people to understand that that's a real word, Scott?
Yeah, we need a campaign for that, right?
I think we do. I think that would be a great campaign.
Yep.
But arborist is a real word. And what is an arborist, Scott?
It's simply someone who takes care of trees. Arboriculture is the science or the care of trees. So an arborist is someone who takes care of trees. Woody plants, I mean, you could talk about large shrubs and things like that, but really it's tree, arboriculture, care of trees.
Arboriculture or arboriculture, however you choose to pronounce it, is another one. You type that in, you're going to get the squiggly line.
Right.
So, and this is not new. This is stuff that's been going on for a long time.
For centuries. Yeah.
And give us a quick overview of Bartlett Tree Experts.
Well, we're a 110-year-old company. Started on the East Coast in the Connecticut region. We're not from Bartlett, Illinois. Wonderful town, but a lot of folks think that
you don't specialize in Bartlett pears.
Yeah, in fact, I was in Einstein's Bagel this morning, and they see my logo, and they're like, "Oh, I live in Bartlett." And so, well, we're not from Bartlett. It's a third generation family. Robert Bartlett's our CEO, who, by the way, is going to be getting the Hutchinson Medal from the Chicago Botanic Garden this year.
Wow.
It's not out publicly, but I think I can talk about that. So it's the highest honor.
So we're breaking that news right here on this show.
Yeah, I'm quite thrilled by that. In fact, it's I think the only arborist that ever has received that was 1954. Another arborist in the area got that. So it's really, that's their highest honor. So we're quite proud. But Robert, third generation family, he's taken this company to 2,500 employees and 130 offices around the world, including 10 in London. We do a lot of work for a lot of the palaces and places there in London, but here in Chicago we have 4 offices.
Okay. And there you go. That's how we get started. Now, see, we've got all that out of the way, which means that when we come back from the break, we can dive right into tree care. And I mentioned my cat, Lagata, because you're going to talk about sometimes
cat rescues. Sometimes
cat rescues in trees by
arborists.
arborists.
Do that, yes.
All right. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Scott Jamieson is here. We'll be right
And FM 95.9.
Hi, this is Karen Hudson from Illinois Citizens for Clean Air and Water. You're listening to Smart Talk. The Mike Nowak Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
On the lighter side, local firemen were called out an hour ago to try and rescue a 9-week-old kitten stranded on top of a huge elm tree on Maple Street. So far, the frightened cat has eluded their grasp. Poor little pussycat. The lighter side, that's terrible. Poor little furry thing. Oh, golly, I'm with you, pussycat. Hey, don't be afraid, little pussycat. We're just trying to help you.
Rob, you okay?
What's the matter?
There's a cat caught in a tree.
Rob?
Oh, honey, you heard about it too, didn't you?
Are you all right?
Oh, I'm fine, honey. I'm okay. Hi.
Rob, listen, I got something important to tell you.
Oh, they got the cat down.
No. Get the cat.
Oh, honey, I'm ashamed of you.
Rob, will you listen to me? You got a telegram.
From the kitty?
It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio. Flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome at 877-711-5611.
Okay, folks. No, you're not having a flashback here, and we'll just fade that out. No, it's the second segment here. We have the opening. And, you know, it's not such a bad thing because often you guys tune in late and you don't hear the countdown and
They're still getting their coffee.
the comedy bit I do at the top of every show. So we got to play it late. And I wanted to do that on purpose because that was, of course, the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I'm going to wave to our interns. Anybody ever heard of the Dick Van Dyke Show in the studio there? Andrew has. The other two, no. Oh, you have?
Hannah
Okay.
has.
All right. So, Hannah, we have to have Kayla a little chat, okay, about Dick Van Dyke. But that was a very funny bit about the cat in the tree. And the reason is because Scott Jamieson is here from Bartlett. Go to bartlett.com, Bartlett Tree Experts. And you've done this before, haven't you?
One time I did, yes.
Just
but-
once.
Just once, but arborists are known to have to rescue cats on a regular basis because the fire department, they do not do that. You know,
No matter what you hear on the
Right.
Dick Van Dyke Show.
Exactly, yeah. They will not do that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Uh,
So arborists, we commonly get that call on cat. And the cat story I had was, this goes back 25 years ago when I was climbing on a regular basis. And we got a call into the office. Our office was in Park Ridge at the time, and we covered Chicago. And so I got my climbing gear, came out, and thought it would be kind of a good human interest story. So we called, I think it was WGN at the time, a news station, to come out and kind of film this thing. And fortunately, they never found me up in the tree because I had great fears of trying to rescue this cat. That on live TV, this thing would fall out of the tree.
or you would
yeah,
do a header.
Yeah. But it didn't. So but this kitten had been in the tree for, they said 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Meowing at night. And so that's usually a sign if a cat's been in a tree that long, it's not coming down until it gets weak, and then it literally falls out of the tree. So I climbed up in the tree. It was probably a 50-foot tree. The neighbors were all kind of huddled down around watching. And the thing with cats are really, they're afraid, so they start moving further up in the tree. So I was at the top of this tree, and I've got my little prop, and the kitten was about the size of this stuffed animal here, and I had gloves on, and I was prepared to get claws in me, but I grabbed the cat by the scruff of the neck, which is what you do. And sure enough, as I did that, my sleeve came down, and it sunk the claws right into my wrist, which was a painful experience. But growing up as a kid, I'd always watched Animal Kingdom, the Mutual of Omaha, show, and they would always capture the animal in a pillowcase. So I brought a pillowcase with me, and took the cat, put it in the pillowcase like this, gently tied it up like this, and then tied it to my climbing line and lowered the kitten down to the ground, which was then recovered by people there. They took it
And
into
then they let the cat out of the bag.
yeah, that's very good. They let
Sorry.
the
There
cat
we
out of
go.
the bag.
Nicely done.
So anyway, they took the cat in and had it checked out, and then what warmed my heart was a week or so later, I heard that the actual woman that called me, nobody owned this kitten. They didn't know where it came from. They adopted it and they named it Jamie after me. It's Jamieson. I know it was the coolest thing. So
Well, I tell you what,
it was successful.
take your kitten out of the bag.
Yeah.
You're going to do a quick photo pause here because I know this is going to end up on Instagram or something. So Kayla's got the camera out. I left my camera, of course, in my pocket in my coat somewhere else, but there you go.
So that it's interesting in that I've read people that there are arborists that market this. We don't market this as a service, and we actually try to kind of avoid doing it. But if we have to, if there's no other choice, we'll go out. But there are some arborists, not in our area, I've seen on the East Coast that specialize in this.
Really?
And that technique that I just happened to use is something that's exactly what they do. That's the best way to get a cat out of a tree. Cats, again, they cannot climb headfirst down. Their claws are curved inwards. So the only way they can come out of a tree is by backing down that tree. And a lot of times they won't, especially when they keep moving up higher in the tree. So unfortunately, most of the time they will just let go and fall. Sometimes they survive that fall, sometimes they don't. You don't see skeletons in trees, so they don't just stay up there and die. They ultimately let go and come down.
You're making this a lot sadder than it really is.
This isn't good Sunday morning.
They are, but that's the arborists have done that, and that's the technique that can be used to save a cat. But a lot of times, they'll come down on their own. Sometimes they will, but often they have to jump or they fall. They don't readily climb back down.
Are there other animals that get caught up in trees that you have to rescue, or just cats?
We've done we'll get calls for parakeets or cockatiels that have flown out and it's sitting in the tree. Now, obviously, they have an advantage on us when we climb up the tree. They can fly away.
Yeah, they're just kind of messing with you guys.
So those are ones where we just politely decline and say, unless it will come to somebody. I've not personally been involved, but some other arborists have, taken food up, or they call them or something, and they'll come and they can grab them. But often those are the most heartbreaking because those birds, once they're out of the cage, boom, they're gone and they are taunting you. Like, hey, come and get me, and then they fly to the
and then
next
they
tree.
my parents lost a parrot on their back porch, and because it had flown out in the back. And here's the story I remember: it flew out in the back, was sitting basically on the back porch. And then, of course, the neighbor comes and goes, "I'll help you get the parrot," and then it flew away. Yeah. Thanks a lot, neighbor.
We've rescued some raptors, and that requires a license. We have some folks that have a federal license to capture or grab onto hawks and things like that. Anybody just can't. They are federally protected, so if they're injured. So we've had some people that have been trained to do that and have the proper licensing to do that. And usually they're injured in some way and they're up in the tree and they just need an arborist helping hand. So we've done that a few times.
This idea that arborists are called upon to do almost superhuman feats at trees is amazing, because it's something I don't think the average person thinks about when they think about bringing an arborist to their home. And that's why I asked, when you mentioned the cat thing, I thought, I wonder what else they have to do. As you mentioned, raptors might be part of it.
Yeah, and we're not called to take care of raccoons and things like that, but often arborists will encounter squirrels and raccoons in trees, and that can be a really scary situation when you have someone, you're hanging from a tree 100 feet up, and all of a sudden a raccoon pops out, or a squirrel is not happy that you're there. And we've had arborists attacked by both of those animals. Nothing serious, but you get a bite from one of those, you got to go in and have to take,
especially because raccoons tend to nest in holes in trees, especially oaks. Yeah. And if there's a litter there and you don't know it's there.
Yeah. I remember years ago in Oak Park, we were removing a tree, and we when you make that final cut, you make what's called a pie cut, right, in the base of the tree, and that then is that the stem falls over and it lands safely. And we made that pie cut, and that part of the tree was a little hollow. and out popped 3 raccoon little baby heads out of there, and they scurried out just in time before that tree was falling over. So
Wow.
yeah, I wish I had a camera because it was quite cute to see these like little raccoon eyes. Like,
Suddenly,
what are you
he was in the middle of a Walt Disney film. All right.
yeah, and when they lost their home, but they always find, I'm sure. Find something.
Well, same with woodpeckers and other birds will tend to be in the dead portions in the cavities.
And we have to be conscious of that. And if we know there's animals in there, or birds especially, and in some parts of the country we work, they're protected species. And in fact, when the black-crowned night herons are nesting in Chicago, we can't work on certain trees. Certain parts of the country, we have certain species that nest, and you have to stay out of those trees for a particular time frame while they're nesting. So we arborists, again, have to just be aware of those local laws, in some cases federal laws.
And of course, that's all part of the arborist training, I would assume. I mean, you tell them this isn't going to happen very often, but you better be ready for something like this, right?
Yeah, you've got to know those things.
Well, that's amazing stuff. That's Scott Jamieson from Bartlett Tree Experts. And now we're going to get away from critters. And let's say it might come up again. I mean, if you got a critter question, 877-711-5611, or on Facebook or on Twitter and all that. We've had an interesting winter so far, in that we just got information from our meteorologist, Rick DeMaio, yesterday. And how many degrees above normal did he say each month was?
Was 6.8, something like that?
It was in the realm of 6 degrees above normal for each month, December and January.
Right.
That changes the equation for you guys in doing tree work a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. A couple things. I mean, one, a lot of times we save our certain work for the wintertime, pruning oaks and elms, which need to be pruned in the wintertime to prevent disease spread for this time of year. And a lot of times we want to get our equipment in the backyard. And if the ground is not frozen, which it has not been that, solidly frozen, it's tough to get our machinery back in there. And it also protects the perennial gardens and things like that when they're frozen. So that has been a problem. But we've also been seeing some freeze-thaw cycles on trees, and shrubs. And mostly these are the conifers, the plants that hold their needles or leaves, or evergreen-type plants. They transpire when the temperatures get warm. So they start to evaporate water. And if the root system is not active, which it's typically not this time of year, and often that ground is frozen, they can't replenish that moisture that they're losing through their leaves through these warm, sunny days like today. Like today, those stomata or pores in the conifer leaves will start to open up, and moisture will start to leave. And it's going to be windy today, so that just exacerbates that drying out. And the evergreens can't pull water out of the soil right now, because typically,
they could now here in this area. Because our ground is not frozen.
In most places, it's not. In some places, it is. Around the country, we have office in Minneapolis. That ground is pretty well frozen, so you get this sort of thing. It's going to start to dry out. But
so it depends where you are.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
But yeah, if the ground is, if there's moisture available, it can be pulled up. But again, the roots are just not active, so they're not actively pumping that moisture. So it has to be almost like a straw effect that occurs, and that's not as effective as when the roots are actively functioning, so they're still asleep this time of year.
Yeah. You mentioned something actually very important, and that's because I'm aware of the ground freezing and thawing and being unfrozen right now. Why? Because I'm having work done on my home. Now, we're going to talk about it on the show very soon in the next few weeks, because Ron Cowgill and his crew from DNR Services, which is, he does Mighty House radio program here on Smart Talk. They have been insulating my home. This is a big deal for me. We got a grant from the city to come in and blow in cellulose into the walls, and they've been drilling holes all around the house. And then they take a hose and they blow in the cellulose. This morning, the house is still a mess. I go up to the closet upstairs this morning to get my underwear, and there's cellulose all over it. And I realized there was a part when they were blowing in last week, there must have been a crack in the wall, and it blew all into the closet there, and it's covered my clothes. So I'm going to be tossing those. But the point I was going to make is they've been outside doing a lot of this on my garden in front. That that soil is so compacted right now. It's going to be really interesting to see what comes up. And they were going, "Hey, look at the shoots coming up." And I went, "Oh, my goodness, they trampled the daffodils too." Okay. Now, the daffodils will probably recover from that.
Yeah.
But the soil itself is all compacted, and I think before the season starts, I'm going to have to get out there and try to loosen it a little
You've
bit.
got a lot of perennials up in that bed, too.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be and that's one of the things you run into when you're doing this. That's why Scott says it's better if the ground's frozen. All right, we got more tree information from Scott Jamieson of Bartlett Tree Expert. It's Mike Nowak.
GO AM and FM.
Just a closer walk with Scott Jamieson from Bartlett Tree Experts on a Sunday morning, a beautiful Sunday morning. There's some sunshine out here. I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods, but we haven't seen the sun since 2017. So we're very happy to have it with us this morning and melt some of those piles of snow. And it's been a weird also winter. We were talking about the ground in this area, and I'm talking about Chicago area, but if you're in Minneapolis or if you're in State College, I got a feeling it's similar to what we have. Minneapolis is a little colder. If you're in Rapid City, a little colder. But it's been up and down. And one of the things you talked about, and I want to get to trees, dead trees in the yard in a second, but one of the things you mentioned earlier, Scott, was trees budding out. And for a while there, I was afraid they were all going to start budding out and we wouldn't be able to stop it, and then would wreak all kinds of havoc, wouldn't it, at that point?
Yeah, it would. We see this a lot. I mean, this year it's a little warmer, of course, but most of the trees' activities are based upon light, periods of light. So as even the temperatures do get that activity going a little bit, but it's the light sensitivity that really moves the processes within trees, and that really doesn't change a whole lot. So trees continue to follow the number of hours of sunlight within the day, and as that increases, that's when they kind of wake up and say, "Hey, I've got more light, more photosynthesis opportunities," and that's what starts moving the trees actually to their full function. But you'll start to see some stirring, certainly when the warm temperatures occur. But here in the Midwest, the trees go into this kind of deep dormancy, so they often don't awaken as quickly. Other parts of the country further south, it's kind of a lighter dormancy, if you will. And so when you do get some temperature changes, well, they'll start flowering, they'll start pushing their buds, things like that. We haven't seen that too often here. When we do, though, it typically is that early part of spring coming right out of the winter, and then you get a cold blast that comes in. We'll see that with magnolias, right? They start to bloom and they just get blasted with the cold. And that's a rather common thing.
And fruit trees as well.
Fruit trees as well.
Will get really hit.
Every year, every winter is interesting for me as an arborist because as you come into the spring, we always see different species affected differently by the winter. So this year is another atypical year, and we just don't know yet. We won't until spring and even late spring on how some of the plants will react to what's going on right now.
Well, I noticed how much bigger the magnolia buds seem to be this year.
Oh, yeah. Well,
at my house, they're just like
they're swelling.
getting,
I think again, that temperature is just, they're starting to, pump some, material fluid through there and getting ready. Yeah.
But you just don't want, you don't want a week of 60-degree temperatures because then all heck breaks loose.
Exactly.
We got a notice here on Facebook. Let's see, where are we here? If I can find it. It was about. Here we go.
About the dead trees?
Don't remove dead trees from your property if they are in a safe place. Decaying trees and logs contribute greatly to the nutrient cycle of the forest, replenishing the soil. That is the comment from Catherine, who wrote that. And I would say critters. It's habitat
right.
too. But there are problems with that too. So talk to folks about if they want to keep a dead tree in their yard.
Well, I think that the comment on Facebook was a good one. If it's in a safe area, and we have many clients that have woodland areas behind their manicured, garden areas where most people don't venture. So, having branches fall and stems fall, it doesn't pose a risk to anybody. But for us as arborists, that's the number one thing, ensuring safety of a property. And so you don't want a standing dead tree where it could fall on somebody and and hurt them or kill them. And so in situations where people do want to leave a standing dead tree, we'll try to talk them into cutting that tree to a safe height and maybe just having a single large trunk. That could be a nesting cavity for woodpeckers or other critters, but something that's not going to readily
Or
fall
raccoons
over.
where
Or
you
raccoons.
can climb
Yeah.
up and surprise.
Yeah. So that's what we typically do. But yeah, if you have a wooded area, a forested area, let those trees stand in their fall and recycle those nutrients back into the soil. That's absolutely right on.
We were during the break mentioning the dead ginkgo that I have in my yard.
Yes, Mike killed a ginkgo.
First ever.
First time. You know, that's part of my problem here. It's like I'm the guy who's gonna kill a ginkgo. But right now it seems pretty secure. It's not gonna fall on anybody, and that's at least what I'm hoping is the case. And if it looks like it's going to be dangerous, I will remove it. In fact, I will give Bartlett a call if I need it to get it out of there. Which takes me to something else. All right, folks, if this is a great time of year to have somebody come out and look at your trees, and Bartlett Tree Experts will do that, and they will make suggestions about what you can do. I know a lot of folks have trees and they think, I really should get an arborist out there, and I haven't.
Or someone's got to come out and look at this.
I've been meaning to do this for a long time. All right, I'm going to do something, and I'm sandbagging Scott here because he didn't know I was going to do this.
Okay.
I'm going to say for the next week, if you give Bartlett a call, go to bartlett.com, you pop in your zip code, and you can get the office near you. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
You give me a holler at the Mike Nowak Show, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, or send me an email, mike@mikenovak.net. I will make sure you get an autographed copy of Attack of the Killer Asparagus.
Wow.
Ooh.
So they're becoming collector's items. There's not too many of them left in the box. But that's the book I wrote about all kinds of things in the horticultural world. None of them serious. And if you just get Bartlett out there to take a look, because I can guarantee right now they're going to show you things you did not know. Don't you think?
Well, and it's a great time of year and it might be counterintuitive, but it's a great time of year to take a look at trees, because this time of year when the leaves are gone, we can see broken branches, branches hanging up in the trees. We can see deadwood, believe it or not, sometimes even better than when the leaves are on. We can take care of things like rust on hawthorns. It's a great time of year to prune hawthorns. For those that don't want to make applications to control rust, you can prune out the cankers that cause that rust this time of year. And
would you explain what rust is?
Rust is it's a foliar disease that gets on hawthorns, and it cycles with arborvitaes, where these galls kind of go back and forth, the spores, but essentially it causes spots on hawthorn trees, some crab apples, and those spots can often kill back branches. And so this time of year we can see where those spots on the branches might be infected with that and prune that out this time of year. So this is just a great time of year for arborists to take a look at trees and see what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why I say it. And folks, everything's in dormancy right now. So again, it's a good reason to have somebody come out and take a look. It's not going to affect your garden. Do it, because they're the experts. As I said, they're going to show you things you didn't even know were there. And if you do it this week, just write to me, and I will send you an autographed copy of Attack of the Killer Asparagus. And you know what? Maybe I'll throw in a little extra goodie as well. I'm just saying. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country. If you're in Pennsylvania, because I know we broadcast out that way, do it and have one of the Bartlett people come out to see you. Getting back to trees and dead trees and that sort of thing, Peggy got a newsletter from one of your folks, Evan Shore, who's been on this
great
program.
arborist, yep.
And he was talking about snow and ice and the idea of branches falling and the danger of that. And this is also a good time of year maybe to address that as well, isn't it?
Well, it is. Certainly if there's any dead wood in the tree, you want to take that out. But having an arborist inspect the tree for structural issues. We've had some heavy wet snow events, some icing events, and that puts different strains on branches. And although that branch may not have broken, getting an arborist to take a look at the tree, get an arborist up in the tree, they can inspect the branches to ensure they're not cracked, and then they might come down in the next windstorm or the next snowfall. And that's something that we see a lot with this heavy, wet snow. The other thing I'd mention is you don't want to go knocking those off your trees. Let that snow. I mean, we may get some heavy, wet snows yet here next week. I think they're calling for some. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. You don't want to go out and shake the branches. Just let that come off naturally, because you can actually cause more damage doing that than just letting it thaw off.
And if it's your ginkgo, maybe you'll kill it. You never.
Yeah, shake the branches on the ginkgo.
That's right.
What a jerk move.
Yeah, I know. What a jerk move. I mean, how many people
have you left that tree as wildlife habitat then at this point, or
yeah,
it is. It's a standing dead tree.
It's a standing dead tree. It's standing dead ginkgo in my backyard, and as I mentioned during the break, the squirrels love it, the birds love it. I don't have any raccoons, so I don't have to worry about that, but they love it because they can get from one area to another very easily in the backyard.
And it adds structure.
I also have a partially dead heptacodium, but that died, and now it's coming back. So it's one of those things.
Monument to poor arboriculture.
Oh, ow. No, monument. Who knows why heptacodiums die? They just do, I guess. Like redbuds.
Yes.
They just sometimes up and die. All right, I'm going to take more abuse when we come back. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. AM and FM.
Pumpkin spice is my ride or die. If you're feeling low, get on this pumpkin high. On my basic beats.
We could still have. No, they don't have it anymore, do they? I don't know. You got to have pumpkin spice latte.
They probably have some
winter.
syrup bottles in the back.
It's like the Christmas lights. I'm still turning mine on at night because I call them winter lights.
Oh, nice.
I've actually seen a lot of them, like
and a lot
driving
of
in some neighborhoods.
And a lot of people in my neighborhood have been leaving them on, and I'm thinking, it's the darkest time of the year. I want something to cheer me up.
Yeah.
So I pop them on every now and then.
Yeah, mine are still up. I haven't taken them down. They're just not turning on at the
My
moment,
Cheflura still has the lights on it. That was my tree this year. Because it's 8 feet tall, I just decorated it with lights, and it looks great.
Cool.
What can I tell you? Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We've got Scott Jamieson from Bartlett Tree Experts here. Go to bartlett.com. We got a couple of things we want to talk about before we get out of here, and one of them, the dreaded volcano mulching. Why do we have to bring this up on every show? We do have to bring it up on every show because people keep doing it.
It's all over, and this is another good time of year to kind of see it in the stark landscape. You can really see the term volcano mulch comes from mulch and or soil that's piled up high on the stem of a tree, and it looks like a volcano. This is a good time of year now that it's not frozen, is to go out there and pull that mulch down. You want to see the root flare, which is that tapering or that flaring out of the stem as it meets the soil. You want to see that and not have it covered up by mulch. And in my town of Arlington Heights, they're doing a really good job trying to educate the citizens. We've got a tree keepers group out there, Arlington Heights Tree Keepers Group, that are led by some fantastic folks that are going after that, leaving flyers on doors and trying to politely educate folks, not offend them. But one of the reasons this happens too is with our landscape contractor friends that haven't necessarily been educated on this either. That what they do when they cut the circle around a tree, they'll often pile up the soil because they don't want to take it away, and so that there's nowhere else for that soil to go or mulch, so they pile it up around the stem, and so that soil on the stem causes potential rotting and decay and issues with that tree, and it also prevents oxygen exchange at that very important soil interface there with the root flare. So you want to pull that away for a couple reasons. That's what's going on.
Oxygen exchange. Now that's interesting because I assume that kind of happened at the tips of the roots where they're more fibrous. But you're saying it happens also.
It also happens around that what we call root collar, where that stem goes into the soil. We call that the root collar, the root flare. There's a lot of different terms for it, but that's a real sensitive area, and when that's covered up, we see problems. So
all right,
move that away.
So stop volcano mulching your tree. And if you see a company doing it, say, you're doing that wrong. That will endear you to them. But they're doing it wrong, and people do it. And I get asked all the time, why does this still happen? And arborists like you scratch their heads and say, we don't know. It's just ignorance, and it just keeps getting
It really is education. I mean, nobody's
Yeah.
typically trying to actually harm a tree. It's just education and habits, breaking habits. People that have done this for years. So
Yeah.
it's breaking habits.
All right, salt.
Salt, yes.
Fortunately, we haven't had to use a lot of it in our area. Other people might have had a lot more snow or ice. Here's a study. The MWRD, which is the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, has a new message, which is go easy on the salt. And basically, the way you do that is you stay ahead of the game. As soon as you get snow, you shovel it out. And if you do use salt, you use a little bit. They're saying a 12-ounce mug of salt will suffice for a 20-foot driveway or 250 square feet of sidewalk. If there's salt left on the ground after the ice melts, too much was used, basically. So you know that's your clue. If the snow melts and you still see salt, cut back next time. A 2018 study revealed that changes in salinization have affected 30% of the drainage area of the United States over the past century, most prominently and most rapidly in the eastern and midwestern areas of the country. The use of road salts is a prime culprit, the study concluded. What about trees? Because often you don't have a choice if the city's salting the street and it's spraying onto your tree.
Right. Well, so the damage occurs because salt does what? It dries out the roots typically. So it's pulling that moisture to the salt molecule, the sodium that's in the soil. And so we actually have a salt recovery program. Bartlett does. I would think any good certified arborist would have a program like that. But essentially what you want to do in the spring is flush that salt out. And we'll often use something called X-Salt and sugar cow, which is a material we mix with water. It grabs onto those sodium molecules, grabs onto that, and then you can flush it out of the tree root zone. And so by getting rid of that, you're moving that sodium away from the tree roots and stopping that drying.
How do you know when to do that?
We typically do that at the beginning of the spring season when you know there's not going to be any more salt added to the
So you wait.
So you wait. Yeah, you don't do this now because you want to wait until that kind of spring season. All right, salting's over. We've got rain, so a lot of times that natural rains will wash that salt out. But if you use these surfactants that grab that sodium molecule, it grabs it and it pulls it away from the tree a lot easier. So we've seen some really good success. For years it was gypsum, and gypsum's part of this. But now there's some other materials on the market that grab that sodium even more effectively and flush it out.
So the average consumer can buy these?
Yes,
products?
typically it might be hard to find, but they're out there. X-Salt is the name of one, and then as I said, it's Sugar Cal is the other one. But we mix
Sugar Cal.
Yeah, C-A-L. Yeah.
Okay, and X-Salt.
Yeah, E-X-A-L-T. It's a soil surfactant.
Oh, X-Salt.
Yeah, X-Salt. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
X-Salt. Yeah.
I get it.
So that's really effective, and that's in areas where there's a lot of salting. I used to do this a lot when I worked downtown, and that was my arboricultural area, and they use a lot of salt on the plazas, obviously because of the risk, and that salt then would flow into the pits and where the trees are at and have nowhere to go. So we would use gypsum quite a bit to counteract that.
And what about alternative salt products like magnesium chloride and calcium chloride?
Yeah, I always say go that route. You can. There's all sorts of things out there, but you'll read plant friendly and all that sort of stuff. And some of that actually works better than salt. And
depending on the temperature.
Exactly, depending on the temperatures. Exactly right.
And what was interesting, the MWRD article also pointed out, it's not melting the ice; it's melting the where the ice and the pavement are. And so that you're not looking for the salt to melt your ice.
The interface?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was in the MWRD article. So, when you use huge amounts of it, you're not actually melting the ice. It's just accumulating.
Yeah. And again, my neighbors are always like, it's
everywhere.
Salt for days. And
they like hearing the crunch, apparently.
Well, I think people do. I think when they feel the crunch and they think they've done a good job of putting salt down.
Yep.
When it's kind of, no, that's not it. That's too much. Now you've gone too far. Okay, we got like 60 seconds here. Anything you want to wrap up with?
Spotted lanternfly. It's been mentioned. It's an invasive species. It's really heavy on the East Coast. It's on the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's being transferred by egg masses on things that are man-made. So we expect to see it here. It's a sucking insect, and it drops a lot of honeydew. And if it hits the grape crops or the hop crops in the U.S., we're going to have a big problem with this pest.
Wow. Okay.
Spotted lanternfly.
We will talk about it more on the show. Scott Jamieson, thank you so much for being here. Go to bartlett.com. Remember, call him this week for an evaluation. You'll get a free copy signed of Attack of the Killer Asparagus. All right, for folks on the network, we're out of here. Everybody else, stick around. Go green.
And Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, root and bacon. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat.
And welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, the second big hour. We've got the correct intro music and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get it for the first hour, but we got it for the second hour. We're making progress.
Yeah, we had a nice preview of the first hour and the second hour.
I know. In case you were just listening, that guy you heard, he's gone. He just walked out the door.
But you can catch it on podcast, and you can catch it on Facebook Live on the rerun.
That's right. And on used tubes.
Used tubes?
On the used tubes and on
the used tubes.
And the periscopes. For anybody who does that, because they stay up there on Twitter as well. We had some good news a couple of days ago. We'll get to promoting our fellow radio folks in a second, but I wanted to do the good news first. And this was in phys.org, not F-I-Z-Z, but
Fizzy?
P-H-Y-S, as in physics.org. Monarch population up 144% at Mexico wintering grounds. They get a ding for that. Now, before you all start uncorking
doing a happy dance,
the champagne, I'll give you the good news, okay? This winter, researchers found that butterflies occupying 14, almost 15 acres or 6.05 hectares of pine and fir forests in Mexico. And it's an increase from the 6.12 acres or 2.48 hectares a year ago. So it's a significant increase in the area where butterflies are overwintering in Mexico. And it's the biggest measurement. I guess they mean, the biggest number. Largest number since the 2006-2007 period. And of course, you might remember in 2013-14, there was a low of just 1.66 acres. And we're talking acres, which was 0.67 hectares. So we've gone from 0.67 hectares to 6.5 hectares, which is like a tenfold increase. Now, they do say, Ryan Norris, an ecology professor from the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, said it would be dangerous to think the improved coverage in their wintering grounds means the butterflies were out of the woods. It buys us time, but that's the best it does, said Norris. Norris saw little connection between this year's increase in the concerted conservation efforts along the butterflies' migration route, especially in Mexico, where the government, with the help of local communities, has nearly eliminated illegal logging inside the butterflies' protected area west of Mexico City. So this is good news. We haven't fixed it, okay?
No.
But this is good news.
Yeah, and one of the articles I was reading said the fact that we had that ice storm that came through in April kept the butterflies south, so there were a lot bigger, stronger of a population flying north.
It was a perfect storm of good weather.
Yeah, and this year, if it's warm, all bets are off.
Yeah, they said it was the Goldilocks effect this year. Everything was just right for the Monarchs, so it's not... Okay, let's do this real quick before we break.
Hey, don't miss Gabby Road with Hannah, Fred, and Justin. This Sunday, they're going to be joined by Stephen Shalowitz.
As in today, right after our show.
Yeah, Stephen Shalowitz, host of the One Way Ticket Show, and meteorologist Ginger Z is talking about weather around the country and Groundhog Day. That's Gabby Road Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time right here, followed by Bill Turk and Carrie Kendall with Playtime.
With Bill Turk and
Carrie Kendall. And then the Elizabeth Alfano Show, premier vegan meals for Super Bowl today. And that's going to be from 3 to 4 right here.
What's that?
The Elizabeth Alfano Show.
No. That other thing you were talking about, a bowl, some kind of bowl?
Yeah,
All right.
like nachos and.
We're talking about slaughterhouses in Chicago next. Stick around.
At Gabby Road Radio.
I had a hard time in a terrible land, waiting for the good Lord to open his hand, but the good Lord's mercy's in high demand, and I had a hard time in a terrible land.
Yeah. I like the fact that the good Lord's mercies are in high demand. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. This past week, and by the way, you should know that's Ezra Furman and the Harpoons. That's a great song. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's cool. This past week, there were a series of events at Northwestern University. And I managed to sneak in on one of them. There were some luncheons and some panels there. They were doing a campaign against factory farming week. And as part of that, there were a number of guests who spoke. The Animal League Defense Fund was kind of behind this campaign, and Northwestern picked it up and ran with it and got a bunch of
Northwestern Law School.
Law School, yes, thank you. Robert Grillo, who is in the studio with us right now, was on the panel I went to on Wednesday. So was our friend Karen Hudson from Illinois Citizens for Clean Air and Water. We actually met with Robert a couple of weeks ago to talk about. I ran into him at Can TV when you were doing a show with Frank Avila, and I did a show on soil, and you were doing one on slaughterhouses in Chicago. And a number of you listening might be surprised, or you might not be surprised to hear that there are still slaughterhouses in the city of the Big Shoulders. And I realized that by looking it up yesterday, that it's the city of the Big Shoulders. I went back to look at the Carl Sandburg poem, Chicago, and it's hog butcher for the world, not hog butcher to the world. It's you know, all
It's
those little
mutated over the years.
well, you know, and you learn stuff wrong, and then you memorize it, and it's for the longest time we were the hog butcher for the world, and now we're at a point where those slaughterhouses are starting to disappear.
Right.
And thanks to the work of people like Robert Grillo, who's in the studio with us, and Free from Harm, his organization, and also Slaughter Free Chicago and Slaughter Free Milwaukee. And we'll get to Slaughter Free Milwaukee in just a second because we have another guest on Zoom. So, Robert, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So you're working really hard. I posted it on my blog. You can go to mikenovak.net. And there's a video of you the other day speaking to the health department and a meeting they had. It wasn't much of it said it was a confrontation. It really wasn't much of a confrontation between you and the health department director. But you did manage to get your sentiments felt in that meeting, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've been to two of their public meetings, which is the Board of Health meeting. It's a public meeting, and we thought it was a good opportunity because the Commissioner Arwady, is there. She's part of the meeting, and she's the most powerful person in the Department of Public Health. She works very closely with the mayor on initiatives, on health initiatives. So we thought we'll take our chances and we'll show up for the public comment period and see what kind of time we can get. The first time we went there, we got about 4 minutes. And we had 3 people. The last time we went, we had 12 people, and we got about 10 minutes of their time. We showed them video footage and photos that we took inside of slaughterhouses to show them the violations that they were not finding, that their inspectors don't find.
Yeah.
And asking them, who are these inspectors? What are they doing?
I'm surprised you got that much time. That's actually considerable time.
In a meeting that lasts about an hour.
Yeah.
That's considerable.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us about Chicago. How many slaughterhouses are still in the city, and under what kinds of conditions are they run?
Well, we think there's about 13 left, and there's 2 large animal slaughterhouses that slaughter hogs, or we call them pigs, sheep, and
goats. And then there's the rest of the other, besides those two, the rest are poultry slaughterhouses that slaughter also rabbits. Rabbits can be slaughtered in poultry markets. So, yeah, and they're scattered all over. There's a few up here in this area, like Western and Devon. There's one that was on Lawrence that's closed down now on Lawrence Avenue near California.
I saw one like Fullerton further west too.
Yeah,
that map?
there's one, John's. You might be thinking of John's Live Poultry on Fullerton.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as like, what you see when you go in these places, you see filthy, squalid conditions. You see animals that are in crates that, if we're talking about poultry, for example, you'll find just stacks of crates of birds with hundreds of birds in them. And they're forced to just languish in these crates for hours and sometimes even days because they slaughter them to order oftentimes. Well, that means the truck delivery could come and the birds get delivered, and then they just languish without food and water, and they're forced to squat in their own waste, and they're dumping waste down into the levels of all of these other birds. So it's just a horrific mess.
And they might not have been fed on the way over it either.
They may have been, yeah, some of these places order birds as far as California. Why? I don't know, but all the way from California. Imagine that could be a 4 or 5 day journey. Who knows? And yeah, by the time they get here, some of them show up, they're dead, they're diseased, some are on top of others that look like they're dead. I mean, the conditions are appalling. They're worse than anybody could even imagine. And when you see it for yourself, it's the only way to really understand, because otherwise you have this abstract idea and you think, oh, it's a quick, painless death, and then it's over. Well, far from it. It's the exact opposite.
That's what you would hope happens, but unfortunately that's not the reality, as you know, not just in those slaughterhouses, but in factory farms, which is why Northwestern Law School was having this series of panels this week to call attention to that. I was sitting in there looking at the students, and I wondered, you were in front of, did it look like you were having an impact at all, that it was getting through to these law students that maybe this is not such a good thing?
Yeah, I did. I felt like there was a really good eye contact and engagement with the students. Some of them were nodding their heads. Some of them were like noticeably moved by certain things that were said. So yeah, I think that I think it definitely had an impact.
So you're faced with something that I'm faced with as a radio show host here. I'm going to say, fortunately, most people, we're not showing any photos on our video stream because they're very disturbing. I've been to your website. I've seen what you had. You brought some photos to a meeting with Peggy and me the other week. And what I really want to say is, yeah, I know what that's like. Please don't show me any more photos. But as you mentioned, if people aren't aware of what that's like, it's kind of a necessary evil, but that's got to be a sword that cuts both ways for you, because it's going to drive people away, and yet at the same time, you have to compel them to act.
Exactly.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, like let's look at the civil rights era as an example. Nobody wanted to look seriously at the atrocities that were taking place in the South, in cities like Birmingham or Selma. Nobody really wanted to look at that. They thought, oh yeah, that's a terrible thing, what could be going on there, but nobody in the North really wanted to pay any attention of it. What Martin Luther King Jr.'s strategy was to stage activism down there and to expose what was happening. And what he did is he showed how the authorities retaliated against peaceful protesters. The civil rights peaceful protesters, how they were water hoses were used, how violence was used against them. And that got all over the news. That got into the public's attention. And that got people to say, wow, this is a really serious problem. And so exposure is the only exposure is the only way to move the dial in the direction of change.
Sunlight, so to speak, as we say, transparency, let people know what's really going on. Is this may sound like a dumb question, but is there a need for any slaughterhouses in Chicago?
No.
And who are the customers of these slaughterhouses? Is it going commercial or is this retail?
Retail. Most of it is retail. We think that, there's always going to be some people that will, it's rare, but there's some people that will defend the slaughterhouses and say, well, it's my right if I want to walk in there and buy something, buy a piece of meat. Well, what they're not considering is the fact that what the workers go through, the conditions that the workers deal with, which are extremely dangerous, some of the most dangerous jobs in a dangerous occupation in the country.
Probably physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Exactly. Levels of PTSD because of the violence, physical injuries, 3 times more likely to have a very serious physical injury like dismemberment than any other form of employment. So, and then you have the communities that are forced to deal with these places. And so when you have that person who defends the slaughterhouse, they're not affected by the slaughterhouse in any way, shape, or form. So they can have a privileged position and say, oh yeah, we should be able to do that. Well, you're not considering all the negative consequences of having that kind of business in your neighborhood.
All right. So you decided, you tell us about the evolution of Free from Harm into Slaughter Free Chicago, Slaughter Free Cities, and then Slaughter Free Milwaukee, and we will get to our other guest in just a second.
Sure. So Free from Harm was established in 2009, and that's our nonprofit. Free from Harm has a strong web presence. We've really focused on a global kind of audience with Free from Harm for the many years that it's been operating. We have a strong social media presence, a strong web presence. The Slaughter Free Chicago campaign started in 2018 with the intention of doing something very grassroots and local. And so SFC is a campaign of Free from Harm. It's an attempt to take a local issue that we care about that could raise the public's consciousness about the issues of the environment and animal protection and human health and all the things that are negatively impacted by slaughterhouses and raise awareness of that. Then when something amazing happened in Milwaukee in October, activist friends over there came to us and said, hey, can we set up a Slaughter Free Milwaukee? We've got an issue we need to deal with right away. And so that led to then other chapters like Slaughter Free New York City, and now we're talking to the people in Toronto about a Slaughter Free Toronto, and maybe LA. So we're kind of like branching out.
All right, I think that's a good way to go to our guest, and he is Balaji Venkatesan. Did I get it almost right, Balaji?
It's spot on.
And you're in Milwaukee, and we got about 2 minutes here before we break, but we'll come back and if we don't get the whole story, and we'll finish it then. But basically, you sucker punched the city of Milwaukee. You came on the scene about 3 days before they were going to vote on bringing a brand new facility, and it stopped dead in its tracks. Can you explain how that happened?
Right. So a friend of mine who's also an activist, she learned about a proposed slaughterhouse, which until that point in time, nobody really knew that there was going to be a slaughterhouse because they kind of masqueraded that as a packing and logistics facility, right? That's how they advertise that. So once we learned that, we talked to Robert because he's done specific work on banning slaughterhouses in the city of Chicago. So we wanted to tap into that expertise, and I've known Robert over the last couple of years, and they're friends that I've known in a long time. So we tapped into that, and then we set up the Slaughter Free Milwaukee, and then we started what was a campaign to call the aldermen who were representing the different districts in Milwaukee, and they were going to have a voting the following, in 5 days they were going to have a vote. And that was going to determine whether this slaughterhouse was going to be established in the inner city or not. And we learned that we started to start a campaign calling the aldermen and everything. And then the day of the voting, we actually showed up with about 60, 70 activists.
All right, I'm going to hold you right there. We'll finish the story with Balaji Venkatesan and Robert Grillo. We're talking about Slaughter Free.
Listen, learn, and laugh.
We don't want to burn down the mission, but maybe we can get rid of a slaughterhouse or two. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're continuing the story. By the way, we have Robert Grillo in studio from Free From Harm and Slaughter Free Chicago. On the Zoom, we have Balaji Venkatesan, who is part of Slaughter Free Milwaukee. He was telling his story. Basically, there was going to be a huge facility built in one of the neighborhoods of the city. Many people didn't know about it. 3 days before he starts to mobilize, then he shows up for the city council meeting. And what happened at that point, Balaji?
Pretty much, we had a lot of media coverage. We pretty much had all of the local media present at the Common Council meeting. And then we showed up in there when they were taking the vote. And then, like I mentioned before, none of the residents of the area actually knew about, a slaughterhouse coming up in their area. So they heard it on the radio that morning, and then, a few people showed up. And then when they were doing the vote, because of all the media and all the attention it was getting, the council decided to suspend the vote and then go back to the drawing board, talk to the local residents, and then retool this and then come back. And that was the first step in what started as a subsequent sequence of steps. And then in a week, the alderman of the district who was sponsoring that, upon talking to the residents and learning the overwhelming opposition to that, basically came out and said, I am going to resign this offer. I'm not going to pursue this slaughterhouse in my district.
Balaji, all I have to say about that is that's not the way these things happen. You realize that most of the time people like Robert Grillo come in. Can I have a little more volume there on? Thank you. Robert Grillo come in and you work and you might pass the health director in the meeting and she says, yeah, we'll get back to you. And but coming in 3 days and taking somebody like Strauss, which is, Strauss Brands LLC, in this multi-million-dollar facility, and suddenly it grinds to a halt, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so you must have been really impressed with that, Robert.
We were all blown away because the alderman that was the one that was somewhat critical of the bill, of the proposal, told us there's not a chance in hell that's going to not get voted. That's going to go right through. He basically told us that you are wasting your time.
What?
And this is and to be sure, the difference between that and what's going on in Chicago is facilities in Chicago. A lot of them have been around for decades, and they're old and nasty. And this was a state of the art, facility where I imagine they wouldn't have had the same kinds of health problems that you have in Chicago, and yet you still defeated it, Balaji, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a teamwork, but also, when you say, whether it's a state-of-the-art facility or otherwise, issues that impact slaughterhouses, they are common across, right? Whether it's a mom-and-pop slaughterhouse or well-established, cases of PTSD, slaughterhouse is bad for the workers. It's bad for the environmental impact. It's bad for the animals that are being trucked in, and like Robert mentioned, I don't know if we want to go into the details of that.
No.
But and people realize that, right? So, but I think, this also speaks to one important stuff, which I'd like to share is when people come together, right? And, like Martin Luther King said, I'm going to paraphrase his thing. When, our lives start to end when we see bad that is happening and take no action, right? So when good people come together and we take strong, direct action, we can accomplish, things like this. It's possible, right? It might seem impossible, but it's possible because there's a bunch of dedicated people that showed up. There was over a couple hundred phone calls and emails that were made to the alderman. And one of the aldermen said they've never in their entire career seen 200 emails come to their inbox.
So there you go. All right. So let's go back to Chicago for a second here, because I'm wondering about the inspection process for these facilities. I met when we met a couple of weeks ago. I told you the story of a shared kitchen in Chicago. Zena Murray this is in 2012, and she was hounded by city inspectors because they didn't understand the concept of a shared kitchen, and her kitchen was spotless. I went in there, I saw it,
Right.
and yet they would come out every other week or once a month. When a lot of restaurants, if you get one inspection a year, that might be considered a lot. And yet, so why aren't these facilities shut down if they're so egregiously mishandled?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of baffling, isn't it? With Chicago, I think the only way a business gets inspected is if somebody complains. So we understood that early on, and we decided, okay, we're going to just flood the city with 311 complaints.
Mm-hmm.
And they reacted. They inspected all of the remaining slaughterhouses, the health inspections, BACP, which is Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, said they did their own inspections. They shared their reports with us. And what we found is, they inspected them probably for the first time in years. But the inspectors, you read their reports, and it's really weird because when you read the reports, it sounds like it was written in some cases by like a young, like a 6-year-old. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to insult anyone directly, but it's like the reports don't make that much sense. And it really calls into question, like, who are these inspectors? How are they trained
Yeah, are
to
they
look
trained?
for?
Yeah.
I mean, for example, the Department of Public Health states very clearly in its food rules code that the birds must be kept clean, healthy, and in good condition. I mean, that's just a sick joke because anybody who's been to any of these places on any given day can see just how miserable the conditions are for birds, especially. So they're never going to be able to enforce a law like that. That's just one of many laws that they would probably never be able to enforce. They're so unrealistic to what this industry is like. And so we're just trying to get them to a point to say, hey, you can't enforce these laws. So you have no business licensing them, right? That's our argument, essentially.
And you had something during the break or as we were coming back that you wanted to ask, Peggy.
I was going to just ask on media coverage because one of the things I noticed, Balaji, on one of the Facebook videos you sent where there was a couple talking that lived in the neighborhood or a son and his mother who lived in the neighborhood, of how few people even knew these things were happening, that this was even going to be in their neighborhood. So I'm just wondering, how is media coverage? I know Veg News has covered it, Jane Unchained, Elizabeth Alfano, we're covering it. There's been a lot of other coverage. How is this affecting it, do you think? Is it getting the word out of people even knowing it's there?
Yeah, for sure. There's different avenues, right? Some people exclusively just watch TV, right? Some people just are on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and all that. Some people just listen to radio on their way to work.
Yeah.
So having a variety of different exposure to this issue definitely reaches a far more audience than if we were just sharing that, say, on social media.
Yeah.
Right.
So how are you? Are you finding the media is the mass media, the general media wants to hear about this?
Yeah. So anytime there is something that involves the city officials and a big slaughterhouse or something like this, I think people just are interested in knowing more, right? Because people are like, oh, the city is doing something, right? So definitely there is an interest. There has been multiple media outlets that have still contacted us because there are still talks about reviving this deal from the dead.
Yeah, it will
Yeah.
rise from the bathtub like what's her name in Fatal Attraction. So let's get Robert. Because we have like a minute and a half left. What's your campaign here? How do people get involved?
Yeah, so to get involved, we encourage people to go to our website at slaughterfreechicago.com and click on join. Get signed up on our mailing list, and then you'll get a welcome email to tell you all the different ways you can get started. You can come to our regular meetings. We have actions. We have an action coming up on February 19th. And the focus is the mayor. Right now, the focus is the mayor, Mayor Lightfoot.
Do you have a retention?
We went to City Hall in November, and we showed up at her office with 65 activists, and we sang songs, we chanted, we did great speak-outs, people that have experienced slaughterhouses. And they came out to talk to us.
And to be sure, you're doing this in a nonviolent way. That's your whole idea
Correct.
with that.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's nonviolent action, but it's showing up at people's offices that have the power to make the changes that we want.
All right. Once again, you can go to slaughterfreechicago.com. If you're on Facebook, you can go to Slaughter Free Milwaukee on Facebook. You can also go to freefromharm.org. And if you go to any of these sites, and of course on Facebook, Slaughter Free Chicago. So all these places you're going to find out how to take action. Robert Grillo and Balaji Venkatesan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
On WCGO.
I know I played this earlier, but it's not this version. I played the part with the brass in it. Here's just the piano, and it's just a closer walk with Rick DeMaio on a sunny Sunday morning.
He's probably walking along the lakefront right now.
Rick, we understand you want the tickets. We have no idea what you're talking about.
That's the point. I'm messing with your new intern.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's the way it works, folks.
You guys taking notes in there?
That's
No. Andrew, you too?
Sure. Yes, I'm
okay.
taking notes.
How did that go, Mike? Long time caller, first time listener.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
That's exactly
What?
How that goes.
Well, we
And,
thought maybe you wanted the autographed copy of Attack of the Killer Asparagus.
Oh, I have several of those.
and he can't get rid of them. Hey, Rick, all I got to say to you is,
don't be a jerk.
Okay, there we go. However, go
Don't
ahead.
ask me any tough questions today. I had 2 wisdom teeth pulled on Saturday.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I
Two?
had a filling. Yeah, I had a filling in my top left molar crack off while I was at the AMS conference in Boston.
Ooh.
And so then like 3 days later, I went to the dentist and he goes, "I don't think I can repair that. That tooth has got to come out. And being that it's a wisdom tooth, the one on the bottom's got to come out as well."
Mhm.
So I had that done yesterday. The top one came out lickety split. The bottom one, not so easy. Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of salt wash in your mouth and ice packs.
You know what, Peg? That does work, but when you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel like you got a bowling ball attached to your jaw, it's not pleasant.
Ow.
Ow, I'm so sorry.
No, I know. I'm doing okay. I'm talking out of the right side of my mouth today. How about that?
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Oh, well, he usually talks out of the left side of his mouth. So,
Right, because I don't talk about out of both sides of my mouth, right? How does that work?
but bump. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Well, you may speak softly and gently and gingerly if you want.
Yeah, no, I'll be okay. So, guys, what do you think about the fact that it's the first day of sunshine in almost 12 days? I think it is. Isn't it amazing?
What is that bright light out there?
Yeah, that's something big. And on top of that, we're actually like having temperatures during the afternoon, well above normal. What's been amazing about the last week, and I was showing this to my students a couple of days ago, our overnight lows were nearly 12 to 15 degrees above normal. And when you look at those maps I sent you, parts of northern Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan had overnight low temperatures for the last 7 days averaging 20 to 24 degrees above normal.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's phenomenal.
And here we are. We were talking to Scott Jamieson from Bartlett Tree Experts in the beginning of the show and trying to determine whether trees are going to try to bud out, and they haven't yet. But Peggy's noticed some magnolias with plumper buds on them, and this is what this kind of weather does to them. And we're going to be getting up around 50 today, aren't we?
Yeah, and I still wonder because is it the warm overnight lows or is it the abundant sunshine that helps the buds of the trees? I don't know. I think if anything, the warm overnight lows, just keeps the ground from getting real frozen. So maybe it's more of a low level thing. When we talk about permafrost and things like that. I noticed that the Great Lakes, jumped up to 6.5% ice, and then when you look at the areas around northern sections of Michigan and Wisconsin, it seems like most of the overnight low temperatures being incredibly warm were probably due to the fact that the lakes are wide open. I mean, it kind of works hand in hand, but we finished up the month of December 6.3 degrees above normal. We finished up the month of January exactly 6.3 degrees above normal. And I was going back and looking at some of the climate records yesterday, and I don't think we've ever had 2 months in a row like that with such incredible amount of anomalies, except for the winter of 2012. So it'll be interesting to see. We would actually have to be 12 degrees below normal for the month of February to be actually near normal for the winter. And again, guys, this comes after the fact that we had the second warmest year ever on record, 2019, without an El Nino. So it just goes to show you the warmth of the Great Lakes, the lack of sea ice in the Arctic, and the fact that the oceans are just warmer just about everywhere, leading to some of these long-term climactic shifts that also have an impact in a medium term as well.
And as you say that, I'm thinking, in this case, you can't even say this is an anomaly right here in the Great Lakes. You're drawing the connection to everything else that's going on the planet right now.
Yeah, I just made the connection between less sea ice and the better ability to be above normal for overnight lows, meaning that anytime you get a wind off the lake, you can have temperatures in the mid-30s as opposed to when the lakes are frozen, you can easily get down below zero. So I think short term it's like that. And the talk I'm going to give at that event coming up on February 29th, and I know you and Peg are going to be at as well, is basically, is there a connection between climate variability and global warming and our weather patterns here in the Midwest and the Great Lakes? And these are always things that I have to ask myself as well, because I know someone is going to ask me. So whenever I agree to do these things, I do them more so as a challenge to myself, because I want to increase my knowledge from that standpoint, so that when someone does ask me that, I just don't give a flippant answer if I don't know. I have to kind of know that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the month of February works out. But even though we'll get cold tomorrow, we'll get some snow on Tuesday and then again on Thursday. In the end, the next 2 weeks were just slightly below normal. But who knows, if we set up with a deep trough out west like we had in the month of November, who knows if February will end up being colder than December and January. It doesn't have to be that much colder to be colder than December and January.
And we're already getting to the point where those super cold snaps can't happen. I mean, you can get them, but
with the sun's angle,
right, and that sort of thing. Is that right, Rick?
Yeah. I think, you know what, I used to always say that the middle of February is kind of the end of your super Arctic air, but we had some really, really 1 or 2 day cold outbreaks last year. If you remember, in the first week of March, we had some phenomenally cold weather, and all I kept saying is that could end up leading to a colder spring, which obviously it did. It didn't lead to a colder end of winter. It just led to a colder spring.
All right, give us a 20-second forecast.
All right, so high near 51 today. That'll tie the record. Mid-40s tomorrow early, then turning colder in the afternoon. 1 to 2 inches of snow on Tuesday, and that should be it for the week.
Fantastic. We'll talk to you next week, Rick. Thanks so much.
I'm good, guys. Take care, guys.
Bye. All right. And don't forget to call Bartlett.com or go to Bartlett.com and get an estimate, and you will get Attack of the Killer Asparagus. Until next time, go green or
go home.
Is that it? Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.